Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this watch. After the year 2000's blockbuster PAM64, Panerai in 2001, decided to create a regular production offering that encompassed much of what made the 64 so special. That watch, in turn, was redesigned for the F series year. So remember, C was 2000. F series would have been the rollover from the original PAM087 dial to the one you see here. So this is the one made from the F series through the H series, which was the 2005 model and the last year for the PAM087. That's exactly what we have right here. We have a second series PAM087 made in 2005. So you are looking at the Panerai Luminor Submersible PAM087. This is a 2005 example, and it was actually sold in 2009. You also note a feature that's common to many of these early to mid-2000 submersibles. Panerai continued to use tritium on submersible dials long after transitioning the rest of the line to Luminova. So that is the real deal. That's not Fotina. And this watch is the real deal. Big, 44 millimeters in diameter in the so-called tuna can. And you can see why. It's thick. At 18.3 millimeters thick, this is not going to fit underneath the cuff. 53.4 millimeters from lug to lug. It has a 24 millimeter spacing between the lugs. So 2003, 2004, 2005, we got this dial style, but every PAM087 wears the same, meaning you probably want a wrist my size or larger to really pull this off. I'm not a small guy, even though I have a skinny wrist, so this works just fine, but if your wrist is any smaller than mine, you might want to investigate one of those more recent 42 millimeter submersibles, because this thing will really eat your arm. If you don't have the arm to stand up to it visually, you can get a little bit overwhelmed, and you can see why I say this will never fit underneath the cuff, but at 16 centimeters circumference and up, game on. This watch wears well. Caoutchouc style rubber strap. You can see it's got a little bellows to make it more flexible. Made in Italy, Panerai OEM strap, no crimping, no gouging. And then we have a large polished steel buckle for quick adjustments on the fly. The case, probably the most intense version of Alessandro Beddarini's 90s era Panerai Luminor case. You can see we're still not looking at a Luminor 1950, but we're also looking at outsized dimensions even by Luminor standards. 1,000 meters water resistant with a helium escape valve for saturation divers. Most of this, in good taste, has been done in satin finish to mute the sheer impression of size. And for security, we've got old school Panerai strap fixtures held by bars and screws, a very secure arrangement. If you want to strap swap at home, if you are a Panerista, you've already got the tools for this, and you'll know that no brand in the history of the world, not Rolex, not AP, has ever had as many OEM and aftermarket strap options as Panerai, and that goes double, it seems, for the Luminor series. The watch includes the famous device protecting the crown, conceived in the late 40s, implemented in the 50s. The idea here is that if you had a manual wind watch, which the originals all were in the combat era when they were used by the Italian Navy and its allies, screwing the crown in and out could wear out the stem assembly and its seals. Not great on a water-resistant watch. So having to constantly wind and reset meant a lot of crown action. Remember, early on, Rolex made those cases. They were oyster cases with oyster crowns, so some system of locking and unlocking without threading in and out was needed. So the idea was to just create a full encompassing crown guard that would work with a cam to lock and unlock, and it's that simple. You can easily unlock and lock this crown with wet, sweaty, or gloved hands. If it gets hit perpendicular, it's better protected than with a standard crown guard, and also it's really hard to accidentally jump in the water with your crown unlocked. That's hard to miss, much harder than a screw-down crown that's turned out 2 or 3 threads. When you deploy the crown, you can see we've got hacking seconds, and then we've also got a quick set for the date. And the Cyclops Eye magnifier, unlike Rolex, is under the crystal, so it doesn't add any wart-like appurtenance or projection. And then the dial, like I said, in the F series, and then for the 2 years that followed, Panerai decided to create some distance between the PAM087 and the prior limited edition a PAM64, and so this is that later dial with the indices pushed further out. The color and tone of the dial changed a little bit, and it does look more like its own watch and less like the 64 Bomba. You can see that it is a matte finish, and it's actually a sort of upscale applied index dial, not common on Panerai watches in the period. They're better known for the sandwich style. This actually has appliques, and yeah, they're tritium. So tritium has a half-life of about 12.6, 12.7, 12.8 years, which means this watch made back in 2005 is already dead as a doornail. I'll give you a lume shot so you can see what's what here, but this is the original dial. Now, what has changed, by the way, if you just give it a few seconds, you could see how rapidly the dial itself diminishes. Now, note the hands and note the bezel pearl. Those are on their own schedule because they are newer than the dial base itself. And that's pretty much the way things go with hands. You can only press handsets so many times, and they're considered to be service replacement options. But that's the watchmaker's choice. The owner gets to choose whether to keep the original dial or replace it with one that, quote, glows. And mercifully, this watch has always passed through the hands of owners who kept that dial intact. Now, there's no condensation, no contact damage from bad watchmaking, no evidence of water getting in the watch, which is excellent. The bezel, one of the chunkiest in the business, 60 click, but partly because these hands are newer and more luminescent and the bezel pearl is still active, you can actually use that timing bezel even in the dark, which is wonderful because I've always found a dive bezel to be the ultimate timer. I really don't have a lot of patience for chronographs in many cases, and you don't wind up with the downstream service costs of a chronograph if you use a dive bezel instead. Inside the case, you can see the case back right here, we have what Panerai calls the OP3, which is an oddity. It's a Valjoux 7750 chronograph with all the chronograph parts removed. So still unidirectional automatic winding, 4 Hz, hacking and quickset, with a 42-hour power reserve, COSC chronometer certification, but once you get above the base plate and the calendar system, there are no chronograph indications. So using a rock-solid chronometer certified automatic base inside a hardcore dive watch, this is the definition of a tool timepiece. Rock solid and literally in the hand, it feels indestructible. If you like the look and the feel of a classic vintage diver, and yeah, these are now vintage, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.